happy Father's Day to all of you dads out there, whether you're a father, a grandpa, an uncle, or just a male role model and somebody who's younger than you. Do not underestimate the power of a father figure in someone else's life. Now, most of that power is, of course, found in dad jokes, right? Of course. So it's only appropriate that I begin today's message with that pinnacle of all humor. Some of you are already rolling your eyes and groaning. And just so you know, that is a badge of honor for all of us dads. So thank you for continuing to build our esteem. So here's the joke. How do you know when a joke is a dad joke? When it becomes apparent. Thank you. Appreciate it. Made that one up myself. So today we're kicking off a series like Brian talked about earlier, looking at a series of people from the Old Testament, their stories, how they lived, and they were just regular, everyday people. This morning, we're going to talk about a man named Boaz. He's found in the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. We're going to look at the way he lived his life. And we're going to kick off right from the beginning with our big idea of the day. And that big idea is this, is that the people of Jesus should be recognized for their character and their integrity. The people of Jesus should be recognized for their character and integrity. And Boaz lived this out in many ways. And we're going to find out that he also pointed us to Jesus. But we need to begin by setting the scene for Boaz's story. I want to start by saying that Boaz is not the main character of his story. He's actually a supporting role. The main characters are two women, one named Naomi and then her daughter-in-law, Ruth, who is the title to the book of the Bible. And the account takes place during the time of the judges in Israel. And if you've not read the book of Judges, it's a wild read. There is all kinds of crazy that happens in the book of Judges. Battles and wars, people that do crazy, amazing things. Go check it out. It's a wild ride. But during this time, there was a famine in Israel. And so a man named Elimelech, try to say that a bunch of times in a row, took his wife Naomi and his two sons, and they moved to a different country called Moab. And while there, Elimelech died, leaving Naomi and his two sons without a dad or a husband. And as they grew up, the boys then married Moabite women there in Moab. But about 10 years later, they both died, and they died without children. There's no succession of the family's heritage, and that's a big deal in Jewish culture. And the situation is even more dire than at first glance, because in that day and culture, in this Near Eastern culture, women could not own property. They could not really have an adequate source of income, and so they were on their own. They were destitute. They were reliant upon family and others in order to survive. This is the first 5 verses of the book of Ruth. We get painted a very bleak, anguished picture. It's no wonder that later Naomi tells people, don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara, which is the Hebrew word for bitter. Grief surrounds her. She becomes a childless widow and loses hope. Well, she decides to return to Israel, and she had heard that the famine had ended there. But she told her daughters-in-law, go home. Go back home. Go back to your families. Start anew. Get a fresh start on life. Get remarried. Have new families. One of the women does return home, but Ruth chooses to remain with Naomi, and her words are immortalized in verse 16 of chapter 1, where she says, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. So Naomi and Ruth leave Moab and travel back to Israel, finally arriving in Bethlehem, Naomi's hometown. We also need to understand what the culture as a whole looked like in those days. And the very last verse of the book of Judges gives us a pretty clear picture. It says this, that in those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Our culture can feel that way. That everybody is just doing whatever the heck they want. that everybody does what's right in their own eyes. We are so broken and divided, and we have drastically different values. And this can make it more difficult to live with character and integrity, but not impossible. This is the type of world that Boaz shows up in. This world that everybody just does whatever they think is right. Boaz stands out in a dark time. When everyone else did what they wanted, Boaz did what was right. He's a contrast because he's a man of righteousness in a culture of compromise. He shows us that character is not dependent on culture. That character is anchored in our relationship with God. His character was not dependent on the circumstances surrounding him. We are not stuck following the culture, the habits, the ways of the world. Followers of Jesus should be countercultural. We should be different. You can live with integrity even when no one around you does. Paul echoes this in Romans 12:2, where he says, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think." As followers of Jesus, our character and our integrity are not limited to what we see in our society and our culture. In fact, we can be transformed. We can surpass our culture and become like Jesus. So Boaz enters the picture in chapter 2, where he's described as being a wealthy and influential man. Other translations refer to him as a worthy man or a man of standing. However, prior to this point, you could say that he was ruthless. You got there? What we're going to see is that Boaz is going to display his integrity in how he treats other people. It's harvest time. He's the landowner, which means he has workers that does the work for him. He pays people to go out and bring in the crops, and he's likely going from field to field, checking the progress. How are things going? Are there any problems that need to be solved? And we're going to see how he treats his workers. Ruth 2 verse 4, while Ruth was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied. Now this seems like an inconsequential verse. I mean, what are we trying to pull from this? The people that were harvesting, the laborers, they are not people of high standing. They are low on the totem pole, on the social scale. And Boaz, the landowner, intentionally greeted them with a blessing. He went out of his way to touch base with the people working for him. How we treat people, especially the overlooked, reveals our character. How we treat people, especially the overlooked, reveals our character. For Boaz, it likely doesn't bring him material gain to treat his workers with dignity and respect. But because of his character and because of his relationship with God, he treats them with value. And we see from their response that he is highly respected for it. And this treatment is extended beyond his workers to this strange woman who's in his field picking up grain. This woman named Ruth. Verses 8 and 9, we see Boaz went over to Ruth and said, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Ruth is a foreigner. She's an immigrant. Yet Boaz provides her with protection and dignity. This vulnerable outsider, he doesn't know. goes out of his way to honor her. She and Naomi have been left with nothing. Under the law, an Israelite could, the poor could, they had a legal right actually, to follow the harvesters and pick up grain that was dropped or left behind. They could glean with the harvesters. Landowners are actually commanded not to harvest the edges of their fields. Those are to be left for the foreigners and the poor among them. And this is what Ruth is doing as she follows the harvesters, picking up the stalks of grain that were left behind. And Boaz invites her to stay in his fields, to have a place of security and acceptance. He shows us that integrity is shown in how we treat people who can do nothing for us. So how do you treat the vulnerable? How do we treat the outsider? The people who look and talk differently than we do? How are we loving and serving those who are marginalized and can do nothing for us in return? This is something we all, each one of us, needs to ask ourselves and do some evaluation. Jesus talked about this. Matthew 25. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. How we treat people, especially the overlooked, reveals our character. Boaz's character went beyond treating the vulnerable with integrity, which was good, but he went past that. He also practices generosity and compassion. You see, there were requirements in the law that he had to follow, and he did. He fulfilled those requirements, but he goes beyond the obligation of the law. And he blesses Ruth extravagantly. Look at verses 14 through 16. At mealtime, Boaz called to her, come over here. Help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine. So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her. Pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time. We even find out later that Boaz invited her to come back and stay with his workers throughout the entire spring barley harvest, and then to come back for the entire summer wheat harvest. Integrity isn't just avoiding what's wrong. It's proactively doing right. Boaz models kindness and compassion with intentionality. Character doesn't just fulfill obligations, it expresses itself with generosity. And this is one way that Boaz mirrors the character of God. Throughout much of the Old Testament, God's goodness is often synonymous with his generosity. And we find that he is generous with his love. He's generous with his patience. He's generous with his grace. He's generous with his blessings. And so when we turn around and practice that generosity, we bear the image of God to those around us. Now, as we keep going through this passage, we find a concept that we are unfamiliar with. And that is the idea of a kinsman redeemer. Now, according to various laws in the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the kinsman redeemer is a male relative who had the privilege or the responsibility to act on behalf of a relative who was in trouble, in danger, or in need. The Hebrew term describes one who delivers or rescues or redeems property or people. The whole idea of the kinsman redeemer is to restore equilibrium. Something has gone wrong. Something isn't the way that it should be. For example, Naomi and Ruth being left alone and destitute because of the loss of their husbands. And the Redeemer does what he can to bring things back to the way it should be. It's all about restoration. And it's beautiful the way God set this whole thing up. Now there's an interaction where Naomi tells Ruth to go to Boaz at the threshing floor. The threshing floor was a public place where they would separate the grain from the stalks. It also served as a marketplace. People would come through buying and selling goods. And it's harvest time, as we said, and harvest time is a celebration. You've gone through the work of seasons to get to the point where you are now, to prepare the crops, and it's all come to fruition. There would be feasting and drinking and celebrating alongside of the work. And a lot of times the men, as they were threshing the grain, they would work and celebrate late into the night, and then they'd just sleep right there. And so Naomi tells Ruth to go to Boaz as he's sleeping at the threshing floor, to uncover his feet and then to lie down by his feet. Now, we don't understand the intricacies of what all these actions imply, but we can know that Ruth put herself in a vulnerable position. If Boaz had been a man of lesser morals, he could easily have taken advantage of her. But he honored God in his relationships. He resists any temptation that might have been there, with Ruth being vulnerable. He has sexual integrity. He remains committed to God's desires above his own. He's protective of her. Later, he tells her, don't go back home. Stay here in the middle of the night. She doesn't want to go walking home by herself in the dark. Some lesser man could take advantage of her. There's wild animals. He protects her by telling her to stay close. And he realizes that through these actions, through uncovering his feet, laying down at his feet, that she is requesting, she's asking him to fulfill the role of kinsman redeemer in her life, to restore that equilibrium. But he also recognizes that there is another relative who is a closer, he's first in line to be that kinsman redeemer. I don't know how they set it all up to know who was where, but he knew. He knew there was another person that was first in line. He could have taken the shortcut. Boaz could have and just been like, yeah, we'll do this. But he took the proper path to ensure that everything was handled legally and above reproach. And he teaches us that honor in relationships means doing what's right even when it's hard or slow. We can all move too fast to snatch what we desire because it feels good or it's what we want. But relationships are worth doing right. And that means that it might need to go slower than we want it to go. It might mean that we experience hardship and pain along the way. But if the relationship is worth it, it's worth the sacrifice. Because integrity means doing the right thing, the right way, at the right time. There's a final piece to this puzzle because through his character and integrity, Boaz leaves a legacy. Boaz and Ruth get married. It's kind of a little fairy tale ending. They get married, and Ruth becomes pregnant, and they're living in, I don't know if you caught where I said they live. They live in this little town called Bethlehem. And Ruth became pregnant, and they had this son named Obed. And Obed eventually became the father of a guy named Jesse. Jesse became the father of David. The same David who God ordained to become king of Israel. A man who is said is a man after God's own heart, whose psalms we read and sing today. And I can't help but think that the honor, the character, the integrity that this man named Boaz had was passed down to his son Obed, who passed down to his son Jesse, and was passed down to his son David. And it gets better than that. Because if you go over to Matthew chapter 1, you read this genealogy, which is just a list of descendants and ancestors. And it's there we find that a man named Boaz and a woman named Ruth are named in the direct lineage of Jesus. A life of character creates a lasting impact. Living with integrity is not flashy. You're not going to become famous for it. It's not going to be popular on TikTok and Instagram. But a legacy of integrity can outlive you and bless generations. I know from experience. I had an ordinary dad. He passed away in 2007. He only got to meet one of his grandkids. But he loved Jesus. He worried a lot and he sure prayed a lot. And I can be thankful for a lot of the blessings in my life because my dad prayed for me. And all of his kids are following Jesus. And he now has 9 grandkids that are doing their path with Jesus right now, wherever they are along that scale from like age 6 up to 20. You can leave a legacy with your character and with your integrity. Boaz did that. And Boaz was the kinsman redeemer for Ruth. And as that kinsman redeemer, he foreshadowed and he led directly to Jesus, the ultimate kinsman redeemer. Because of our sin and our brokenness as humans, we are in danger, we are in trouble, we are in need. We're lost and broken and destitute, and Jesus is our deliverer, our rescuer, and our redeemer. Because of our sin, we're lost. Things are not the way they're supposed to be. And Jesus acts as our kinsman redeemer as he restores the equilibrium in our lives. He makes us right with God once again. And some of you, that's what you need today. You have done things your way and it has led you to where you are. You've experienced brokenness and hurt and pain, and things are not the way they're supposed to be. Things are out of whack. And all you have to do is invite Jesus in as your kinsman redeemer to put right what once was wrong. And others of you have already experienced that. Jesus has already come in and flipped your world upside down in a beautiful, amazing way. But it's time for you to pass on that legacy. You can leave that legacy of character and integrity in others. And character is caught more than it is taught, which means you have to model it. You have to live it as much or more than you teach it. Day in and day out. And while everyone should leave a legacy, as it's Father's Day, dads, I want to give a special challenge to you. There is no shortage of studies and research that show us the power and the positive outcomes that come as a result of a father figure in the life of a young person. It is inarguable. Men, leave a legacy of character and integrity. Along with a lifelong relationship with Jesus, these are the most important things you can pass on to the next generation. More important than a work ethic, more important than grades or education or college scholarship, more important than athletic success, more important than career or financial security, Jesus, character, and integrity are the most important things that you can pass on. After all, the people of Jesus should be recognized for their character and their integrity. Men like Boaz, be a man of standing who lives with integrity and points people to Jesus. Boaz was an ordinary man following an extraordinary God. And guess what? That means you and I can do the exact same thing. There were some other ordinary men during the days of the early church, ordinary fishermen, named Peter and John, who were arrested and thrown in jail for preaching about Jesus. And they stood before the high council on trial. And with boldness through the Holy Spirit, Peter declared Jesus to these Jewish religious leaders. And here's how the council responded, Acts 4:13. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished. And they took note that these men had been with Jesus. We too can be ordinary people in our ordinary lives doing little things with extraordinary impact because we have been with Jesus. Let me pray. Father, thank you so much for examples of integrity and character that we can follow, that we can see how others have lived and the impact that it made in generations to come. May we, whether we're men or women or kids, may we also live with this kind of character. May we impact others by the way that we live with our goodness, our kindness, our compassion, our generosity, our love. To those who can do nothing for us. Thank you for Jesus, who is our kinsman redeemer, who makes right the wrongs and who restores the equilibrium in our lives, who takes the sin and banishes it, takes away its sting, and redeems us in our relationship with you. Thank you that we can have that as a free gift. We ask this all in your Son's name. Amen.